If you're looking for a 4x4 with hybrid powertrain technology and decent towing and a long warranty and 3 rows of seats as well, until now you've been out of luck in Australia, but now there's this, the GWM Tank 500, a new petrol-electric 4x4 7-seater with some serious off-road credentials and heaps of technology and equipment fitted as well. Some great value on offer here. I'm going to tell you all about it in this review, so if you haven't already, please subscribe. Let's get to it. So when it comes to size, the Tank 500 is a fair bit bigger than the Tank 300, which I thought was actually really impressive. You can check out my review in the description below. I've done a hybrid review and a petrol review. I reckon that the petrol version of it was the pick, but it's hybrid only when it comes to the Tank 500. It's also a 3-row only vehicle. So that's right, all versions come with 7 seats. So if you need 5 seats and you want an SUV this big, you just have to fold them down or rip them out. Right, now let's talk about pricing. $66,490 is the entry-level price. That's drive-away pricing nationally, unless you choose one of the colors that costs extra money. And it does come with heaps of standard safety equipment and technology, plus heaps of standard features, including 18-inch alloy wheels, LED lighting all around the car. You've got a big 12-inch touchscreen media system and a big digital info screen as well for the driver. Fake leather trim on the inside. And even the base model comes with a permanent 4-wheel drive system, low range as well, and an electronic rear locking differential. And if you choose the top spec version, you get a front diff locker as well. Plus, there's a surround view camera on all grades too, with a see-through function. So you can actually see through the car when you're going off-road, which is really, really cool and very handy. And then there's this one here, which is the Ultra grade. It adds a fair few extra features, which you will appreciate, let me tell you. Things like heated and cooled front seats, and in the second row you get cooled outboard seats, but not heated outboard seats for some reason. You do get sunshades in the windows, and you get a 12-speaker Infinity sound system in this top grade version as well. And for the money that's being asked, it seems like heaps of value for money, but I've got some really good alternatives that you might also want to consider. Let's talk about them now. When it comes to alternatives to the GWM Tank 500, if you're looking for something that's electrified, you could look at the Jeep Grand Cherokee plug-in hybrid, but personally, I wouldn't. It's very expensive and it might not necessarily fit your requirements. So let's talk about some diesel alternatives. The Ssangyong Rexton is one that I would highly recommend. It offers heaps of value for money. There's a few different variants available. Strong towing capacity, 3.5 tons, better than this. And it also has off-road credentials too. So it could be a great fit for you and your family if you are on a strict budget. If your budget is a little bit more malleable, let's say, then you could also check out the Ford Everest, which is a terrific family SUV, 3 rows of seats, or you can get it as a 5-seater if you want. There's a diesel 4-cylinder or a V6 as well, and it has heaps of off-road capability on its side, 3.5 ton towing as well. So it might stack up better for you than this if your priorities are a little bit different and you are looking for something that's maybe a little bit more rugged and rough around the edges, although it's still very, very good in a lot of different ways. Or you might want to wait for the new generation Toyota Prado, which has a very different approach to the market compared to the last one. It's got the retro themed styling. It's got a whole bunch of extra new technology, and it should be good to drive. I can't wait to bring you a review on that one very soon. But hey, tell me which one you would pick, or would you choose something different? Let me know in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. This car is not a shrinking violet. This is a big vehicle and it looks bigger than it actually is, I think. So it's pretty wide and pretty tall at 1.9 meters, and it's about 5 meters long, but it doesn't necessarily look too intimidating in terms of size, but it does have some really clever smarts in terms of off-roading and stuff. So you open the door and you get pop-out little side steps, which are fantastic. It means that you're not going to damage them if you are off-roading, and also if you are wondering about some off-road angles and stuff, I'll put them on your screen now. So your approach angle, your departure angle, breakover angle, all those things, including your waiting depth, so you can see for yourself. It's got heaps of the credentials boxes ticked, and I'll show you what it's like when it comes to driving off-road very shortly. And at the back, as you can see, it does have a tailgate mounted spare wheel. So that might not be ideal for you. It depends on what your priorities are, but I'm going to tell you now why you need to keep that in mind if you're considering this car. So what does that mean when it comes to parking? Well, it does mean that if you are someone who usually reverse parks into a spot, you're going to have limited usability of the boot space because it doesn't have a traditional tailgate. It opens up quite wide, as you can see. So it might be a bit of an issue for you if you live in a place where tight parking is a regular issue for you. Now, I want to talk about boot space because with the third row seats up, as you can see, it's not a huge amount of space in there. 98 litres is what the brand claims is available to you. That means you could fit a couple of backpacks probably, but it's not huge in terms of that amount of space. Now, you can fold these seats down electrically in this spec, and I mean, that's great and all, but it takes a little bit longer than if you could just pull a tab and flick it forward. So, and we're flat. Okay, so you'll see on your screen now the figure for having the third row down, and that means that it is going to be a very, very usable 5-seat SUV for a family. You could easily fit a couple of prams and some luggage in there with room to spare. So obviously it might be perfectly fine for you if you're going to use it as a 5-seater, but as a 7-seater, you might need to invest in some roof racks and a cargo box or something like that, or a trailer, because it's not necessarily going to be the most practical if you're using all 3 rows of seats. It's fair to say that the interior of the Tank 500 does feel like the money that's being asked here. This has a fair bit of wow factor in the cabin. There are some amazing finishes and treatments to the materials in particular. I love this finish down here below these buttons for your air conditioning controls. Also, I mean, you've got fake wood trim, but it does add something to the cabin. It breaks up all the blackness. Obviously though, that's not the main talking point in this cabin. Probably the biggest talking point is the biggest element of it, this 14.6-inch touchscreen media system, which is your control center for basically everything you need to do with the car, for the most part anyway. So it's got Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, you've got sat nav. You'll use the screen to adjust things like your temperature if you are going to change your temperature, and you can turn the fan down there if you want to. There's also fan buttons down below, but no temperature buttons down here. So that may be a little bit frustrating for you if you are someone who likes to fiddle with the temperature and the fan a lot. There's also car controls in here. So that's where you'll go through and turn off your lane keeping systems and so forth if you don't like those systems. Plus, that's where you can also control things like your seat heating and also your massage functions in the higher grade versions. That screen itself is very, very complex. There's a lot to it, but you do get used to it pretty quickly. If you've driven any other GWM model, you should be able to get to terms with the screen pretty easily, and it doesn't poke up too high on the dashboard too, which I like. There's also another screen here for the driver, which is crisp and clear and has a bunch of information on it as well. And while the controls are mostly pretty good and pretty user-friendly, the fact that the cruise control stalk is down here sort of hidden out of eyesight means that, again, you'll have to get used to using it, but you do. It doesn't take too much learning. And down here you've got a pretty chunky little shifter. So that's an E shifter. So you just have to pull it down or up to change gears, obviously. And you've got controls here for your four-wheel drive system as well. So low range button, just press the button and it's actually really quick to engage low range. You've got front and rear diff locks in this high grade version as well. And there's a few other buttons down here. They are a little bit I guess camouflaged in terms of the functionality because it's a piano black finish. So you sort of need to actually know which button you're pressing so that you do actually hit the right button. But there are buttons also for the seat heating and cooling as well that you can use down here too. Now, storage is pretty good in this car. You've got a big covered center console bin here with a nice soft armrest. There's a sliding tray and a couple of cup holders hidden down there as well, a wireless phone charger, bottle holders in the doors. So all of the practicality elements of this cabin are pretty well taken care of, and so is the comfort factor because these seats, they're lovely. This is the top grade version with the Napa leather trim, obviously heated and cooled as I mentioned, with memory settings for the driver. There's also electric adjustment for both front seats. So yeah, you're not really left wanting for much in the cabin of this car. So let's check out the second row space and see what it's like. So I'm 182 centimeters or 6 foot tall, and this seat is set for my driving position. And as you can tell, I got plenty of space back here, lots of knee room, fair amount of foot room too, and I can stretch my legs out if I want to. Headroom is excellent too, and I reckon if I could triplicate myself, I'd be able to fit 3 of me across this back pew pretty comfortably. Now, if you are the sort of person who is actually just going to put child seats in the back, you've got ISOFIX points in the window seats and top tether points for this entire row, and there's heaps of amenities in the back here as well. So this grade gets these handy little blinds so you can block out the sun on hot days. You've also got vents in the ceiling, which I love. I think that they tend to get younger occupants' faces very well, especially if you've got a kid that's in a capsule. Then you will find that that's a better way of doing things than the vents that you get down here, but you get them as well, so that's great. You've also got a fan controller, temperature controller in this grade as well, so this is the top spec, and it feels like a top spec model. There's no denying that. Storage is decent as well. You've got these pull-out little cubbies on the seat backs, bottle holders in the doors, a little flip-down armrest as well with some pop-out cup holders. So, yep, as you would expect, it's all pretty good in the back row here, or the second row, I should say. Now, I'm going to jump in the back row in a sec. I just want to show you that you can also slide these seats forward if you want to allow those in the back a bit more room. So you can slide both sides forward, and you can tilt the backrest as well. So yeah, you can make it a pretty flexible space for you and your family. All right, I'll jump in the third row, hey? Accessing the third row in a 3-row SUV is always a talking point, and just like most others in this class, the smaller section of the seat is actually on the driver's side. So that might be handy for you depending on how you prefer things to be. If you've always got a child seat fitted to the passenger side second row seat, then you might find that this is a pretty usable solution. Other people might find it a little bit annoying because your kid has to come onto the road to get into the third row. So just keep that in mind. Now, what's good about it? You can flip and slide this seat forward in one movement, and there's a pretty decent gap here. I'll just jump in, and like I said, I'm not the smallest human that's ever lived, and back row space is actually not too bad. Look, I'm in the third row of this vehicle with, well, enough space. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily comfortable. My knees are really tucked in under this second row seat, but I do have a little bit of knee room. Headroom is not too bad considering my height, so I think that it's not too bad generally. But if you are planning to buy this vehicle so you can fit extra child seats in the third row, you're out of luck because there are no ISOFIX or top tether points in the very back. Might be a deal breaker for you. I could totally understand if it was, but if you're the sort of person who's actually just looking for a 5+2, so occasional seats that you might need to use for dropping kids at soccer or whatever, then it could be perfectly fine. I will say though, this seat, because of these headrests that cut into the seat back here, it's just plastic behind there. Most other 7-seat SUVs that have some sort of cutout like that have fabric that extends into that section, so it's not as uncomfortable on your back. But I mean, it's hardly a deal breaker, and if you've got little kids, they're probably not going to even notice it, right? There's also vents in the ceiling as well. You've got grab handles at the back, so if you go off-roading, someone can hold on tight in the very back if they need to. There's a couple of cup holders in the back seats as well, so it seems to stack up decently, if not perfectly. Under the bonnet of the Tank 500 is a petrol-electric hybrid powertrain. It has a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine teamed to an electric motor, and also it's got permanent 4-wheel drive. Plus, there's a 9-speed automatic transmission shifting gears, and that's an in-house developed transmission from GWM. There's low-range transfer case as well, and plenty of different driving modes too, so it does seem to tick a lot of boxes when it comes to the powertrain stuff. And keep this in mind, if you need 3.5-ton towing, this might not be the right car for you because the maximum brake towing capacity is 3,000 kilos, unbraked 750 kilos. So it's still going to do the job, it just might not be able to do all of the jobs. This drive isn't like my usual review drives because I'm here in Victoria in the countryside outside Melbourne, and I've been doing a mix of different driving today, including a lot of open road touring. So it is not necessarily representative of what I would usually do, and it actually paints this car in a pretty good light because in stop-start situations, just like the Tank 300 hybrid, it does have a bit of a tendency to have some hesitation when you're on and off the throttle. So it's not the most seamless transition between low-speed EV and then the petrol engine kicking in, but I think that it's, you know, going to be mostly manageable, and it's going to be perfectly fine if you are doing mainly open road touring in this car, or maybe you just do long distance commuting to work or whatever it may be. So look, it's not necessarily the most refined hybrid system, but it does have plenty of power available to you. So if you want to get the most of the power, you put the car into not eco mode, but sport mode, and that really livens up the throttle response and makes this car surprisingly quick for the size of it. The weight of this vehicle, it is actually pretty sprightly. Another thing you will notice if you're doing more stop-start style driving is that there is regen braking in this car. In fact, it's got 3 different settings for the regen brakes. So that means that if you lift off the throttle, it will build a bit of slowness into the drive experience so it can recoup some energy and feed it back to the battery pack. In the most aggressive setting, which is in right now, it's not like a single pedal driving mode or anything like that, but it does take a little bit of getting used to if you've never had that experience before. However, what I will say is that the brake pedal feel is actually pretty natural, although it is a little bit grabby at times, particularly when you're trying to do low speed maneuvers in parking spots or something like that. You might notice that the brake pedal is just a bit bitey. But it does have some really good technology when it comes to those low speed moves, including those front and rear parking sensors and the surround view camera system, so you can really easily see what's going on around you. But one thing that it doesn't have that some other large SUVs and even small SUVs have these days is a digital camera mirror. So you've just got the standard rear view mirror here, and if your rear seats are full of faces, you might find that it's not as easy to see out the back window as it could be. In terms of the other elements of the drive experience, I think it drives pretty well. It is a ladder frame body on chassis vehicle, so it has every right to feel a little bit agricultural in some ways, but I don't think it does. I think that it has a nice balance in terms of the ride comfort. Sure, it's a little bit firm-footed over lumpy, bumpy sections, but it does have coil springs at the back and a live axle, so it does sort of blend the different elements of off-roading and on-roading quite well, in my opinion. I think it drives pretty nicely, and the steering too isn't too bad at all. There's a few different steering modes, so you can adjust the weighting of the steering as well, and I've been pretty impressed with the level of driving dynamics, and I've been pretty impressed with the dynamism on offer in this car. Look, it's not a super duper fun car to drive through corners or anything like that. You do get a lot of body roll and it can't hide its weight, but I think for most people, it's going to be a pretty nice upgrade from something that's maybe 10 or 15 years old, that's for sure. It's not all sunshine and lollipops when it comes to the drive experience though. There are some elements that could be improved. The tyres, they are GT tyres. I think that's how you pronounce it, but I'd pronounce them shitty because they're not very good. And I also reckon that the lane keeping assistance features, while they're a little bit more refined and nuanced in the way that they interact and intervene with the driver when it comes to lane keeping, they're still not perfect. They still do push you around a little bit, and they can actually tug the wheel in some situations when you don't expect them to, like on gravel tracks when there's no line markings. They can misread the road surface and pull you in the direction that you might not actually want to go. So look, that might be something you want to keep in mind when it comes to the drive experience. Also, the driver fatigue monitoring system is overbearing, and it's something that I would personally turn off every time I drove the car because you have to. Same with that lane keeping system. So all those things, they take time every time you drive the car, or you can just get used to it and be beaten into submission, and I guess that's what the safety authorities want. But anyway, I'll tell you a little bit more about the safety stuff later on. It's also relatively quiet in here. There's a little bit of wind noise at times. If you're on the freeway or something like that, you get a bit of rustle around the windows, but honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the on-road drive experience in this car. So let's go off-road and see what it's like. So we'll start off on unsealed surfaces, and there's a bit of an issue instantly when you go around unsealed surfaces in the wet. It's the tires. They're not fantastic in a bunch of different situations, including on-road, but off-road, when the surface is a little bit looser, you can feel that those tires aren't necessarily what you might want if you are driving a car like this in situations like this. But I have to say, if you are into serious off-road driving, you won't probably need to do too many other mods if you are planning to tackle some serious terrain, because it does have extremely good off-road credentials for this size of car and this type of car with this much luxury on board. It does handle itself really, really well in the unsealed rough stuff. And when it comes to the more technical off-road stuff, you do have front and rear locking differentials, electronic locking diffs in this top spec version, and you've also got a tank turn function. So that means that it will basically lock the inside rear wheel when you're trying to turn around in a tight spot and sort of do like a handbrakey for you to get you around a little bit easier. Those systems both help you out in different situations. Of course, you've got low range as well, and there's a bunch of different drive modes too. Depending on the situation you find yourself in, you will hopefully be able to get yourself out of it as well, because there are so many systems and so many different settings that you will be able to play with this car. Another thing that I've really found quite advantageous is the clear view system. So it basically allows you to see through the car at the surface or the track below the wheels and the tires, and get a better idea of, I guess, your spatial awareness. So it does help you if you're going over rutted sections or muddy holes, or if you're just dealing with tight tracks and you just want to see what's over the front of the bonnet because you might not otherwise be able to see it. So the camera technology, as within the Tank 300, really does set this car apart from some of the more traditional rivals out there, which aren't necessarily as tech focused, let's say. Just bear in mind, if you are going through the more slow speed, hardcore off-road situations, you might find that the traction control system is a little bit overbearing. Even in low range with the diff locks, it can sort of feel like it's graunching and trying to slow you down when you might not want to slow down. But the hybrid system does allow you to have a little bit of urge from the electric motor, and then the petrol engine will kick in to assist as well in different situations. And like for the gearbox, I mean, a 9-speed auto, in low range, it sort of wanted to hold on to gears for a fairly long time, which is a good thing in a low range transfer case. And it did hold its speed pretty well downhill as well. So all in all, pretty impressive bit of four-wheel drive kit, especially for the money that's being asked. It is a big hybrid SUV, and if you're wondering about fuel efficiency, I'll show you the official combined cycle fuel consumption figures on your screen now. And look, GWM says that its hybrids are about power assistance rather than fuel economy outright. But even so, this is a big, heavy SUV, and it does do a pretty decent number on the official combined cycle figure. Now, if you're wondering what I've seen across a mix of different driving scenarios, you'll see it on your screen now. Sorry, it's got a bit noisy. There's a lot of rain at the moment, and I reckon that that's not too bad for the sort of driving we've been doing, including some off-road gravel driving and also a bunch of highway and urban stuff too. So yeah, not too bad, don't you think? At the time I'm filming this, which is mid-March 2024, there is no ANCAP safety rating for this vehicle, but it is going through the process of being tested as I'm filming this. So the brand says that they're expecting a full 5-star maximum rating for this car, and it has the technology to, in theory, achieve that rating. Things like autonomous emergency braking, there's also pedestrian, cyclist, junction detection, there's a lane keeping system, adaptive cruise control, plus you get things like blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert with braking, front cross traffic alert with braking, parking sensors all around the car, a surround view camera as standard on both grades. So yep, it does have heaps and heaps of safety technology, so it should be a pretty safe bet for you and your family. Oh, and 7 airbags as well, including curtain airbags that go all the way to the back. The Tank 500 introduces a new ownership plan called GWM Care for this brand, and it includes a 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty. There's also 7 years of roadside assist and now a 7-year cap price servicing plan as well. You'll see the details of the servicing intervals on your screen now. Now that's not all when it comes to the ownership stuff, because there's now also a connected services system with this car. So that means there's a little SIM card fitted to this car. It can connect up to your smartphone and you can control elements of the car from your phone. Things like heating it up in the morning if it's cold, or cooling it down if it's hot, and even turning on the seat heating and seat cooling if you need to. There's a bunch of other things that that app offers you, and I think that it does add a little bit of value to this proposition. There's no denying that this vehicle ticks a lot of boxes. It has off-road credentials, it has decent towing, hybrid power as well, and it's actually really quite spacious on the inside. But do you think you'd roll the dice on a GWM Tank 500? Let me know in the comments section below. I'm pretty impressed by it, but hey, I'd love to know your thoughts. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.